to the Rock series. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more great content to come. So I wanted to just check in briefly and address the recent news of the Quaker Oats company announcing that they would be removing the Aunt Jemima name and image from their syrup and pancake mix. With this announcement came their statement noting that they recognize the origins of Aunt Jemima were based on a racial stereotype. And of course, this comes on the cusp of the recent protests and uprisings surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement as a result of the untimely death of George Floyd that has now gone down in history. And if you did not know the background of the Aunt Jemima brand, it was founded in 1889 by Chris Rutt and Charles Underwood, two white men who had a ready-made flour that they wanted to market. Chris Rutt got the name after watching a vaudeville show, which is similar to a theatrical or a musical where people sing and dance. And during this show, the performer sang a song called Aunt Jemima, wearing a blackface bandana and an apron. And if you have been hiding under a rock, blackface is the term that is used when a white performer colors his or her face with makeup or paint in an effort to darken their skin to mock black people. Blackface rose to popularity around 200 years ago when white performers in minstrel shows would mimic enslaved Africans on southern plantations. During these performances, they would depict black people as lazy, ignorant, cowardly, or hypersexual in an effort to demean them, while plantation owners and their friends would sit around eating popcorn and getting their laugh on. Now, over the last 100 years, the Aunt Jemima image has changed approximately 6 times in an effort to make her appear more quote-unquote appealing or marketable. The most current image was updated by adding a white collar and pearls, whatever they can do to make it sell, right? Now, personally, I have never purchased Aunt Jemima syrup. In my youth, I knew what it stood for to a certain degree, and by the time I reached high school, I was fully aware. You see, my first form of awareness came at a young age through my father, and my second form came through my education at a black private school. My father instilled in his children the pride of being black, and my school taught me the history that our youth today will never see in their books. My father planted the seed, and my school watered it. Let's get real here. The image of Aunt Jemima is more than just a black woman. It is a mockery, a mammy. A mammy is the mockery of our black women who risk their lives daily. A mockery of our black women who are forced to take care of their slave owners' children while neglecting their own. A mockery of our black women who were forced into domestic servitude every hour of their life. The mammy is a well-known racial caricature of African American women from slavery through the Jim Crow era. This image is so demeaning, yet it served the political, social, and economic interests of mainstream white America. During slavery, the mammy caricature was used as proof that black women were content, were happy as slaves. And Mammy's wide grin was confirmation that she had great love for her white family and belonged with them and not her own. You see, this historic record reflects that the mammy was created by white Southerners to redeem their relationship between black women and white men within slave society in response to the anti-slavery attack from the North during the antebellum period. Abolitionists claim that one of the many brutal aspects of slavery was that the slave owners sexually exploited their female slaves, especially the light-skinned ones who were the mainstream definition of female sexual attractiveness. The mammy caricature was deliberately constructed to suggest ugliness. Mammy portrayed as dark-skinned. She was often pitch black in a society that regarded black skin as ugly and tainted. She was obese, sometimes morbidly overweight. She was often portrayed as old or at least middle-aged. The attempt was to desexualize Mammy. The assumption was that no reasonable white man would choose a fat, elderly black woman instead of the idealized white woman. The black mammy was portrayed as lacking all sexual and sensual qualities. This means that the white wife, and by extension the white family, was safe. Now, the monetization of Mammy is even more mind-blowing. During the Jim Crow period, racial segregation limited most blacks to low-paying, low-status jobs. Black women found themselves forced into one job category, the house servant. And Mammy eventually found life on vaudeville stages and novels and plays and finally in films and on television. During the first half of the 1900s, while Black Americans were demanding political, social, and economic advancement, Mammy was increasingly popular in the field of entertainment. Remember when I mentioned in my George Floyd video that we have always been the entertainment to them? Well, the mainstreaming of Mammy was primarily, but not exclusively, the result of the growing advertising industry. The Mammy image was used to sell almost any household item you can think of: breakfast foods, detergents and cleaners, planters, ashtrays, sewing accessories, and beverages. Mammy represented wholesomeness. You could trust Mammy. Now, what Black people need to get clear about is Quaker Oats' attempt to save face in 2020. You see, Mammy's most successful commercial expression was and is Aunt Jemima. I'll say that again. The most successful commercial expression or representation of the Mammy caricature is the image of Aunt Jemima. By 1910, more than 120 million Aunt Jemima breakfasts were being served annually. The popularity of Aunt Jemima inspired many giveaways and mail-in premiums, including dolls, breakfast club pins, dishware, and recipe booklets. Now, this is where it gets wicked. The R.T. Davis Mill Company, who bought the brand from owners Chris Rudd and Charles Underwood, eventually renamed themselves the Aunt Jemima Mills Company in 1914. And afterwards, they eventually sold to Quaker Oats in 1926. So at a minimum, the Quaker Oats Company was well aware of the history of Mammy, Aunt Jemima, for the last 94 years. And this is where the problem lies. Quaker Oats is 100 years too late. You see, in 2014, it was estimated that the Aunt Jemima brand had sold close to 300 million in products after the family of the real-life Aunt Jemima, Anna Short Harrington, sued Pepsi and Quaker Oats for $2 billion, nearly 60 years after her death, citing that the companies conspired to deny that Harrington had been an employee of Quaker Oats, all while exploiting her image and recipes for profit, while refusing to pay an equitable fair share of royalties to her heirs for more than 60 years. In fact, the company went so far as to deny that Harrington was ever an employee of Quaker Oats, even though her photograph sits in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, where it was trademarked in 1937. So again, Quaker Oats, the damage is done. This is just another example of how Blacks have been mocked and monetized off of for the greater good of white America. And yet, we have nothing to show for it. If you ask me, Quaker Oats is just the next company up on the chopping block attempting to save face during these times of high racial tension. It's all a facade. It's all an effort to make them look good. You see, the damage is done. Y'all ain't doing us no favors. You see, if Quaker Oats really, truly cared about the painful story and the painful history that Aunt Jemima was and stood for, they would have got rid of her name and image when they first bought into the company. They would have made sure that each woman that played or represented the Aunt Jemima figure had some type of financial interest into the same company that profited off of them. They would have had stocks and bonds. Their families would have been set for life. They would have given them their royalties. They would have set up foundations and programs dedicated to give back to the same Black communities that they profited from. And they would have not let the shameful and painful history of Mammy Aunt Jemima evolutionize itself with pearls and a white collar, ending up on the tables of millions of Americans in 2020. And so you see, it's time for Black folks to wake the hell up. This is not just about George Floyd. You see, it's much bigger than that. Mockery and monetization, the 2-for-1 special in white America. Oh, but just add some syrup. It'll make everything taste sweeter, right? And I like the way Yvette Clarke said it. We must never forget that Black history is American history. The achievements of African Americans have contributed to our nation's greatness. Until next time.